Hello and welcome to Bud's RPG Review, where I give my thoughts on role-playing games, card games and board games. Today's review is 2018's Scritch Scratch for Call of Cthulhu 7th edition by Chaosium. Okay, first a bit of history. Released in 2018, Scritch Scratch is a 40-page introductory scenario that was made available for Free RPG Day. It will be available on lulu.com on the 1st of July as a print-on-demand book and also from Chaosium's website as a free download. This is the print-on-demand version. Okay, to the cover. Here, we have a pretty decent piece by Joel Holtzman, which goes a long way toward explaining the content without being too obvious. It's cleverly done. Okay, to the inside. First up, we have a foreword by the author where she describes how she came up with the scenario, as well as her best advice of which type of group to run for. She recommends that it is tailored to the pre-gens contained within, but advises that it can be run for a group of pre-existing characters, but to make sure that they are appropriate. She also mentions that it has been run many times at a number of conventions. There will be spoilers from this point on, so stop watching now if you intend to play this. First up, it gives us the rundown on the pre-generated characters. We have a family and a camera crew. The family, Paul Martin, Shirley Martin and Simon Johnson, are part of a business which specialises in industrial cleaning. The camera crew, Manda Peterson, Tom Chambers and Ellie Stamford, are filming a documentary about them and following them while they do their job. It does make the point that the business is not shadowy in any way. They are not sent to clean up after covert operations. They tidy up rubbish for local councils. Then we have the introduction. The scenario is centred around the village of Muscovy, which is in a secluded valley somewhere in the north of England. A village of little importance that tends to be snowed under during winter. It no longer has a school or a hospital, and the post office is now a tea shop. The council, wanting to tap into the area's natural beauty, has spent the last 2 years attempting to make it more appealing to visitors, and as such many of the houses in the town now belong to absentee landlords and are only occupied during the summer months. There is, however, a problem. Muscovy has never not had a rat catcher, and his dingy cottage stands at the edge of the village backing onto the woods and is sat next to a picturesque Anglo-Saxon church. The council had received a number of complaints about the rat catcher's house, but nobody could do anything about it. That was until the rat catcher, or as he is known, Old Gertine, was run over and hospitalised by a trio of cyclists just over a month ago. The council have seen this as the perfect opportunity to get in and clean up Old Gertine's mess while he is in a hospital, all under the guise of making his cottage safe for his return. The scenario assumes that the players will be using the pre-gens, so for ease of explanation we will go with that, but it does give you some ideas on how to incorporate pre-existing ones, although quite how you are supposed to run the pre-gens with less than 6 players is not detailed. This is followed by an explanation of what is really going on. The reason that Muscovy has never had a rat catcher is that someone in the valley needs to be responsible for offering the area's vermin up to the Green Man, a manifestation of Nyarlathotep. Although nobody here knows when the Gertine family took up this mantle, it can be discovered through investigating that it has been the case for the last 200 or so years. It gives us some information on the real Green Man and its history, and then goes on to discuss how to structure the adventure and what kind of approach to take. The scenario is sandboxed to a degree, although inexperienced players may need the occasional push. It recommends that they visit Old Gertine's place first, and does actually suggest beginning the adventure at the front door of the cottage. Following this, we have a list of Dramatis Personae that the players can encounter during the course of proceedings. These are all accompanied by pretty decent portraits, a nice touch. What follows is a description of the road to Muscovy, and it details all of the pertinent locations such as Lucy's tea shop where the players can find out more about Old Gertine. We then have a fairly alright map of Muscovy, and it even goes into the issue people have with mobile phones in Muscovy. They can easily go in and out of service, something that anybody who has travelled the English countryside will be more than aware of. It details the Muscovy Church, which is around 1400 years old, and full of imagery of mice and rats, and it's here where anyone with the right skills can make the connection that the Latin word for mouse is mus, presumably where Muscovy's name comes from. The church is replete with Green Man carvings, even the stained glass has Green Man imagery. After this we have Old Gertine's cottage. Within, they find a generally clean, if horribly dated place, where they can discover that the rat catcher's actual name is Gilbert Oswin Gertine, and he was born in 1945. They find piles of scrapbooks which contain a collection of anything to do with rats, mice and gerbils, going back decades. Above the fireplace hangs a picture of the Green Man. Lots of clues as to what is going on can be found scattered around the house. It's really up to the players to make the leap. What goes from slightly creepy turns to unsettling when they go into the back garden. Around 10 feet from the back of the garden are Muscovy's woods. Upon entering the woods, they find dozens upon dozens of rat and mouse corpses strung up between the trees, almost resembling bunting. The feeling of being watched is distinct here, and the branches of the trees can be seen moving, even with the absence of wind. The smell of rotting meat perfumes the air, and all of this is of course sanity draining. It's worth remembering at this point that this is all supposedly being captured by the accompanying documentary crew. Also, each time the players return to the cottage after the first visit, the woods have crept a bit closer to the back of the house. The next part of the scenario deals with the nearest local town, Appleford. Here they can visit the Golden Ram, a pub owned and run by the same person that owns the pub in Muscovy that is closed for refurbishment, the Ratcatcher. Here they can speak to old George, who can tell the players in his own northern way about Muscovy for the price of a pint. He recites the rhyme that we have in the beginning of the adventure to the players. Also in Appleford, they can visit the library and museum where they can encounter the head librarian, Joyce Deakins, who seems pleasant enough on the face of it, but who can decline into an angina attack if asked about the local rhyme. It's here that they can discover that the church in Muscovy is dedicated to St Gertrude, the patron saint of those that fear mice. The museum doesn't have much to offer other than adding more weight to clues found earlier in Old Gertine's cottage. The last location detailed is Appleford's community hospital. Here they can find old Gertine, who is supposed to be convalescing but who repeatedly asks to be allowed to go home. If questioned, he will start giggling in an unsettling manner and talk about the trees needing to be fed or that they will go looking for food themselves. After questioning stretches on, old Gertine becomes more and more agitated and will attempt to flee the hospital. The focus then shifts to the endgame. It talks about all of the situations where the Green Man will arrive to take his tribute from the investigators and whoever they are currently keeping company. This can happen in the church where one of the Green Man faces above an archway twists into a howling maw, shooting whip-like tendrils out in hunger, or old Gertine's dining room where the glass on the painting shatters and then it attacks. The woods behind the cottage can even attack, with the trees coalescing into a face. It gives details on fighting the Green Man and even running away, but it would have been nice to have details on the third option, which would be what happens should the players decide to heed old Gertine's words and feed the woods with vermin. The scenario concludes with some options on what the players can do to stop the Green Man, which includes blowing up the cottage using the gas stove, and fleeing will cause them to be pursued by hordes of rats swarming their vehicles, clogging the engine and throwing themselves against the windscreen. Should the players actually escape Muscovy, the council reveals plans a few months later to turn the valley into a reservoir, driving old Gertine insane as he cannot now perform his duty. It gives some SAN rewards for the survivors, and this is followed by the stats for the NPCs and the Green Man himself, as well as handouts for the various locations, and finally the character sheets for the pre-generated characters. Scritch Scratch is one of the better introductory scenarios for Call of Cthulhu. It has a fairly low-key mythos threat and plays on the inherent creepiness of the more forgotten parts of the English countryside. The feeling of Muscovy sitting on the margins of society and the general emptiness of the village due to it being used for holiday homes adds to the atmosphere being played out here, but where Scritch Scratch really comes to life is the small details put in by the author. The descriptions of things like Lucy's tea shop feel like they were lifted from one of my own childhood memories, and the general pastoral feel of Muscovy comes through the pages. Also, the details throughout the book of things like St Gertrude and the name of the town itself add a depth that is often seen. Another thing to note is old George's dialogue. It's delivered exactly how someone from the north of England would say it. Value-wise, it's about right, costing just under £7 or $10 delivered from lulu.com, and on top of that you can usually find a 10 to 20% discount voucher should you search. It is worth noting that this could easily be converted to be a Delta Green scenario should you desire. Scritch Scratch isn't going to set the world on fire. Indeed, the only thing that needs to be set on fire here is the creepy woods at the back of old Gertine's cottage, but you could do far worse than getting hold of a copy and giving your players an enjoyable night in one of the more secluded corners of this green and pleasant land. I give Scritch Scratch an 8 out of 10. If you enjoyed this review, please make sure to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and also check out my other reviews. Lastly, if you enjoy what I produce here, then maybe think about supporting me on Patreon. Bud out.